All right, so this is the official welcome to LiveFULLy tonight. And we've already done a check-in. So tonight's topic, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What I want to talk about is compulsion and unconsciousness. And so this is the only slide. And so that's why I'm like, I want this to be really participative for everyone. But this is what got me thinking about these two things, about compulsion and unconsciousness, unconscious eating. I found that when I wasn't slammed with stuff going on during my day, it was way easier for me to focus on what I needed to do as far as what I needed to eat, being healthy, working out, like getting things done related to my health. And the other night I was working. It was like probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I still felt like I had 300 things left to do. And I had gone to the kitchen, and I'm on a strict, working out, training for the Ice the Body Challenge. Went to the kitchen and I grabbed a bar that I started eating. I went back to my room, working, went back to the kitchen. I grabbed a different kind of a bar that I kind of started on. Was like, oh, this one looks kind of good. And then I went back and I went for a bag of tortilla chips. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, wait, what am I doing? And I literally had that moment where I was like, all of this stuff just kind of happened without me even thinking about it. Like it was almost, I mean, I was conscious because I was awake to do it, but literally it was like almost like as if I was unconscious, that I had like looked to the side and realized that I had like 2 different bars and a bag of tortilla chips that I was like starting to go into. And I was like, well, what is causing this? Like why am I in this behavior right now? When this doesn't happen every day. And what I noticed was, I was like, okay, well, I'm feeling like in my mind, I have a lot going on and busy. I'm kind of like tied up. And I started thinking about, I joke about being OCD, which, stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. And I started thinking about this word compulsive. Like, if you do anything compulsively, like what does that mean? And it's actually part of the mission that when we started LiveFULLy and said, okay, we really need to have a mission statement for what this group is and what the purpose is. So this is the very first sentence of the mission that's in the pinned post, is that the group is to provide education, motivation, inspiration, a safe place for those who face issues related to severe obesity. Like, great, we get that. And compulsive overeating. And so it's like, what does that mean? And you guys who know me, like, know that I really dig into words. Like, I really need to have like a deep understanding for like, we all kind of get what compulsive means, but like, what does it really mean? So when I looked it up, it's an irresistible urge to behave in a certain way, especially against one's conscious wishes. So I was like, okay, if this is against my conscious wishes, like when I'm doing things compulsively, I found myself, I had painted my living room, and I found myself the other day, like taking a razor blade to the baseboards because I had noticed like some specks that were on the baseboard. And so I was like getting it like with a razor blade. And I was like, I don't even know how much time I spent doing that. Like, I really don't. I don't know if it was a half an hour, if it was an hour, like, but it was kind of like, holy crap, like, wait, I've got all of these things to do. And I'm like scraping, the baseboards. This is all going somewhere, I promise. But this idea of compulsion, that we do things without really having it in our conscious mind, to even know that we're doing it. So then I looked up unconscious. Well, what does it mean then? Like, because you hear people all the time talk about like eating unconsciously, which is what was in the post. Like, are you too, like, are you too busy? Like, what are the things that cause you to eat unconsciously? And what does that even mean? So unconscious, when I looked that up, it says that it's the part of the mind that is inaccessible to the conscious mind, but it still affects our behavior and our emotions. So I think about like, I had kind of a rocky day today, and it's like there could be reasons, and there probably, for sure are reasons why, my emotions or behaviors are happening in a certain way that I'm not even seeing. I'm not even clear on why. And to get that clarity is, it takes a lot of focus and personal development and like how to, be in noticing of, when we're in a certain state so that we can change it. And so the last part on this slide is actually Carl Jung is a, famous psychology guy. I don't know what to say. He was a theorist. He, taught philosophy around the psychology, like of the mind, of the conscious and unconscious. And so, according to Carl Jung, our unconscious is information that's, it is there. It's in our mind, but it's just not readily available for us, to notice it. So this is really what I want to just have a conversation about, because the busyness thing for me is where I noticed it, where I was like, when I get busy, I go to food, because not everybody eats compulsively, right? Like this is something that I'm like, well, what makes some people compulsive overeaters that, causes, that leads to severe obesity, and some people not. And so the last part that I'll say before I open it up is, I've heard this multiple times in talking with people about isogenics and getting started. And it's like, are you ready? Are you a 10 out of 10? And one of the things that I hear commonly is that I'm just too busy. Like I have vacation coming up. Like I'm too busy to focus on this right now. And I never really quite understood that. I'm like, well, what does being busy have to do? Like you're still eating, right? Like you're still eating something. You're not like not eating because you're busy. So what does being busy have to do with making the choice of eating healthy or not? Of like continuing behaviors that have you in severe obesity versus eating behaviors that have you like, moving toward a healthier lifestyle. Kind of, like what's that busyness thing all about? And then, to kind of be in it personally and experiencing it was like, like I see that, like that response kind of makes sense to me now, that might be something that someone's not even conscious of. You don't even realize when you say like, I'm too busy, to get started. I'm too busy to even think about meal prepping. It's like your mind is actually telling you it doesn't have room to focus, like to move the focus to eating healthy. And so let me, I'm going to, stop sharing this. If somebody needs me to pull it back up, as far as the comment, if you need it, let me know. But I'm just, I'm really throwing this out as a question. And Mama Joy, I know like this is, kind of your forte is, the psychology of the mind and working with, behaviorally, what we do and habits that we fall into. But I was like, God, how do we redirect this, both if we notice it within ourselves, and then also as we're talking with other people who are like, yeah, I'm just too busy. Like I'm probably an 8 out of 10. I want to do it, but there's too much stuff going on that it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean there's too much stuff going on? Like, that doesn't make sense. But it makes a lot of sense when I'm up at 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning, and I'm eating, you right? Like that I'm done. I don't even realize what I'm doing, that I'm like, oh, whoa, wait a second. Like how do I keep myself focused, and how do I coach or help other people stay focused? Does that make sense? Does anybody, I'll just open it up. I'm going to go on mute.
So I'm too busy to do this. I hear what you're saying and I understand that. I've, not that I can recall, experienced that myself, but as far as the compulsion and the unconscious eating, I have always had a very, very toxic relationship with food. And so I get mad about something, or I get sad about something, or any kind of heightened emotion, I go to food. I mean, everybody's, oh, comfort food. Well, no, I'm like, oh, let's go buy a thing of Little Debbie's and I'm going to eat them all. And it's just, I didn't have any control or any limits. And so I had an interaction with somebody at work the other day, and it wasn't necessarily a positive interaction, and it kind of threw me for a loop. And so on my way home, I stop and I'm like, I'm going to get a huge fountain pop. And the fountain pop machine was out of order. So thank you. Like that's okay. Here's your sign. Right. But I find that still, I want to turn to food and to sugar. When I get in those places where I just get really high emotions, and I just don't even realize it. I was just going home and then I'm turning into the convenience store, and so it's just gosh. And even last night, I was laying in bed and I was watching TV, and I thought, gosh, you mentioned tortilla chips, and I'm like, oh, that's my poison, Chris. That's my poison. And I just thought, man, I wish we had some tortilla chips in the house. And we didn't, thank goodness, because I don't know that I would have been strong enough to say, don't go cram the entire bag of Hint of Lime Tostitos in your mouth, because they're terrible. Don't do that. So I can definitely relate and speak to the compulsion and the unconsciousness of just cramming food and whatever I can get into my mouth.
I wrote that in there because I was trying to justify that. I'm like, these are actually really healthy tortilla chips. I mean, I like having that conversation, that it's like, shut up. Like, that is not on the plan. Like, especially at 2:00 in the morning. It's called a carbohydrate. Like, it's a no. And it's like, I literally was like, a couple of these, that's fine. Yeah. And it was just like, oh my God, like why that night? But there's other nights, right? Like that I'm like, I don't feel that need. That I was like, my mind took me, and I was like, son of a, like, how do I keep that focus? And I really want to be able to relate to people, like you said, like that, like the fountain pop. Like, I love that it was out of order. That is like divine intervention right there. But things that we reach for, I remember that it took me a while when I first started Isogenics, that I would be eating something and I forgot that I had started a new nutrition system. Like literally forgot. right? Like you're in the middle of the pack of the Little Debbies that you're like, oh crap, I'm not supposed to be eating this. But it really didn't occur to you until you were halfway, like it was unconscious. And so, like, to be an understanding about that, like for other people that are like literally can't keep the focus, like how do we, I mean, there's vision boards, right? And affirmations. But it's like, what else? Like, what else do we need to do to be able to notice when we're in the patterns that are like derailing? Like, I mean, there were times that I wouldn't have noticed the tortilla chips until the next day, until I woke up and was like, oh, well, apparently I decided to go eat a half a bag of tortilla chips last night, but like luckily I'm getting a little closer that I was like into about the third or fourth chip. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so yeah, like I hear you with the food as, like it's a provider of comfort for sure. So like emotionally at some point, like you've associated a positive feeling with food, that's, delivers something to you, that you continue to go back because you think that it gives you something good when actually what it's giving you is something not good. Right. So it's like, we got to change that. Like, what do I give to myself instead of food as I'm sad, whatever the reasons are, like I'm stressed, I'm sad, like what do we do instead of eating to do that? Like, like we talk about breathing, right? We're talking a lot lately about breathing. Just getting quiet, get like at 3:00 in the morning, I could have just said, put down the laptop, just stop for 5 minutes, take a moment, take a breath. But instead I kept do chips, s'mores bar, chocolate, peanut butter, dairy free, like because like it wasn't in my conscious focus to stop and say, maybe breathing is actually a better alternative. Who else has some ideas about like how do we speed up this?
So yesterday we were at yoga and the lady was talking about like your hunger and what you're feeding, and she was like, you can feed like your love or you can feed your suffering, and everything has to have food to survive or has to have something to survive, and so I guess for me, like what everybody said, I mean, it's for sure unconscious eating, eating for emotions, eating because of habits or patterns and certain comfort foods that we go to. And so, and even now for me, like you said, the pop machine was out of order, or if you didn't have any of the chips in the house, I mean, that's always a blessing in the sky when you get those cravings and things. And luckily what I have in my refrigerator nowadays is a lot different than what I used to have, but I still do have some unhealthier options. I have like some organic chocolate chip cookies that I send in my son's school lunch. And so we've got better options, even unhealthy food. But just because, like you said, Chris, if you're up in the middle of the night eating 3 bars at 2 a.m., I mean, that's better than what it was before, but that's still an unconscious act that we're, looking to feed something or find comfort in something. And so, but then there's also, I've been listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks. And then there's also that balance between like, am I going to focus on the fact that I'm in here snacking? Am I going to put all my focus on the fact that I'm doing this again? Because where our focus goes, the thing grows. And so I've been doing that to myself a lot lately, like almost that self-sabotage and wanting to be in a state of beating myself up. Even if it is a healthier choice, it's still like, how can I be upset with myself again over this, and so it's just like a constant battle, making sure that I'm not putting too much energy and focus onto if I am eating a little bit extra, because I do want it to be like a lifestyle for me. I don't want it to be something where I'm constantly having to have this battle with myself every day about food, because then all my focus and energy is on food again, you know, so then it's back in control. So I think that's where I am right now, especially today, and like little things that have been happening to me, like when it rains a lot, the toilet gets stopped up and there's one bathroom. And so every time that happens, I get this like agitation, and it's not just that, it's like, I got to get out of this house, I got to move, and it's just like my list of things just like piles up. And then I'm like, you know what, so today I'm like, I don't know why I'm so agitated, but then I have to, it's great awareness. And then, you know, I didn't want to run the laundry here because when you run more water down the thing, and so I was like, but I was so so I practiced gratitude, and so I took my laundry over to my parents' house, and I was just so grateful to have a close house that I could still do my laundry at, and be so grateful for this house, because it's so easy when those little things start happening to get really out of gratitude, and then you start going to the food, and then you get back into your, you know, the same thing. And so it's all very interesting, and I'm so grateful for the awareness, but just trying to find that balance between it all right now for me, and not putting so much focus on what I'm eating all the time, you know, because I don't want to ever be where food's had control over me for so long. And I just want to have a release from that control, if that makes sense.
Totally does. I mean, I love thinking about the balance. It's like you can't, you know, beat yourself up over it. You can't, like, you know, focus on it all day and make it be the center of your attention, because then, you know, it continues and you continue to attract that. We know that, you know, from the law of attraction. So it's like, yeah, building the awareness so that it is in your conscious, but then kind of like not having any judgment about it. Like, okay, well, that's interesting that it's 2 a.m. and I'm on the 4th chip. Like, let's put those back into the cabinet where they belong, you know? But I think, but it's been years of personal development to even get to the point where I was able to notice, right? Like to even know that. And so I think just I think that the compassion, you know, for people that are getting started, where it seems like I just can't even fit it into my conscious realm. Like there's so much going on, and I've got this, I've got that, the whole list of things, right? Like I've got my job and my kids and whatever. I'm like, I don't have time to think about starting a new nutrition system. And it's so, like, it has been so easy for me to be like, what is there to think about? Like, you make a shake. But, like, I'm seeing, you know, like, as, like, where that doesn't, it can't, there's no room for one more thing when the unconscious is kind of like, we're full here. Right? Like we're dealing with everything we can deal with, and we can't fit this one more thing in. And so, you know, I just started really thinking about like, how can we help other people and ourselves, you know, see, like kind of build up to that point of noticing like what the behavior is, like that's occurring, and how to not, like how to get out of that habit.
Chris, I want to, from a psychological perspective, as far as the, and nothing is ever in a perfect little box for mental illness and disorders and things like that. But usually obsessive compulsive disorder is kind of not in the same category as compulsive overeating, even though there's some similarities. And it's never, like I said, black or white. So, but usually they think of the obsessive compulsive kind of overeating, or the obsessive overeating is usually more from an emotional standpoint as opposed from an anxiety disorder. Not that you can't have anxiety, which causes you to want, you know, when you're stressed out, to want to eat. But usually the OCD person is doing some ritual that's not enjoyable. in the sense where even though eating can be not, I mean, you think you're enjoying it when it's really bad for you, but it's still an enjoyable thing. It's kind of hard to actually go into all the different things, but just the point being, it really gets to be where it's that it's much more of an emotional attachment, and it's more of an addiction than the compulsion for the people that are really have that overeating. It's just like that sugar or something where it's really hard to, like alcohol, you cannot stop. And with, once you get to that need for food, it's what kind of satisfies that addiction. And it does take, for as far as the behavior, it takes that extra step. Obsessive compulsive disorder is very difficult to treat, and as well as the overeating disorder. It does take a lot of time to interrupt the pattern, like you were talking about, when you catch yourself in it, because a lot of it, you start to do it and you're not even thinking about it. And so when you are doing it, if you can catch yourself in that pattern and force yourself to do something else. And that's the hardest thing to get people to do, is to stop in that pattern and make yourself do something else, or put that down and do something else. And the more you can do, when you can interrupt that pattern for usually a minimum of, is usually more than this, but if you can interrupt that pattern on a daily basis for 66 days, that's where they've shown the most success, when they've done it from where people are they actually doing, studies and testing people and working people through daily therapy. I mean, it can be really a difficult thing to break. And so, you sit there, don't beat yourself up on that, because it's something that it's not just, oh, well, I'm a weak person, or I can't get myself out of it. It's something that's, you get it, and it's almost like a hiccup loop. You can't get out of it. So, I mean, there's a lot maybe I can try to post some stuff about kind of the differences and more of the emotional aspect. And as far as interrupting habits, that might be helpful. I want to take up the time.
I would love that. I think it would be super helpful. And thank you for making the distinction between the two, because having both, like, it's a double whammy, I guess. Yeah, good job, Chris.
Well, they're related too. It's, related. People with, anxiety disorders a lot of the time have depression, and it's a lot of the same kind of things. And it's just there's a lot of dual diagnosis going on, or people that have a tendency to have, addictions in one area will have an addiction in another area. If they cure one addiction, all of a sudden it pops up somewhere else, because there's something that's inside that, if it's, and then, there's a lot of different philosophies and, different people with their, ideas of where it comes from and things like that. But it's not an easy thing. Not to say that it can't be done, but it takes that constant awareness about it. And just to get to that point where you are aware, and then to focus on that and interrupting the pattern. And that's the hardest thing to do, is interrupt that pattern. And, people that are checkers, and, they leave the house and they think that, they're driving along the road, and I didn't shut the stove off. They have to come back and, check that stove. They have to do it. Otherwise the anxiety just, they cannot even work or anything. And so there's, like I said, there's subtle differences, but it has to do with intrusive thoughts and then the behavior to fix those thoughts. So it's most of the time, unless you're constantly, and a lot of people that have the eating disorder do say that they're constantly thinking about eating. So that's not, like I said, there's not 100% that people say, oh, it's definitely not obsessive compulsive disorder. But when they've done studies and people that do the compulsive eating, when they have their brain hooked up to electrodes, it is in a different area of the brain. So it's a lot of different studies on it. I wish it was something easy to just explain, but it's not.
Well, and it makes me think about the reward that's kind of associated with the compulsive overeating, right? Like, it's like this, because it's so tightly linked with emotion, that it's kind of like, that's what you go to feel better with whatever the situation is. So it's like, if there's anxiety and like the busyness, right? Like, and then you go to food like as a result, then it's obviously something that I subconsciously or unconsciously, have decided is going to make things better in some way. Yeah. And so I think that, just to really understand like how scary it can be to start something new, when it comes to like, like that's a major change. It's not, like to be able to break that kind of an addiction, that kind of a habit, that you kind of know you're in, maybe sometimes you don't want to really admit it. But like, like, it's like, okay, well, we know there's a problem here. And I think just this personal development thing is just so huge in, being able to really help people understand like why the behavior is happening and how, like, what the steps are in order to make that change.
I think too, Chris, I know we probably discussed this before in this group, the issue when you're looking at addictions if you're addicted to drugs or alcohol or sex or any of those kinds of addictions, there's a way that you can, it's not that it's a lot, that it's not difficult to stop those addictions, but you can stop the behavior completely to help with those addictions. You can stop having any kind of sex, you can stop having any kind of alcohol, you can stop having any kind of drug. You can't do that with food. You have to eat. So in and of itself, that makes it even more difficult, and why it can be one of the most insidious issues to try to resolve when it's the eating disorder.
Yeah. You do have to eat.
That's why you don't want to eat, and just, oh, well, I'm just going to start taking a pill to get my nutrition. I mean, that, it's just, there's a whole, our society is revolved around, there's social issues revolved around, enjoyment of family and food time. And there's just a whole different ball game when you're dealing with food. And when you really get down to each individual person and all the things that's associated, you can uncover all kinds of different things that's affecting that one particular person for their specific addiction to food. And it may be more of it could be more social. Could be more part of having anxiety or emotional aspects. And there's just all kinds of things that revolve around that. So it's really involved. And so I just always tell, people that have that kind of emotional eating that, the self-awareness and breaking the pattern can really go a long way to start making some changes, some small changes.
I immediately thought of a situation that happened the other day. I was on my way to a destination, and I saw a Starbucks sign, and I pulled in. And I pulled behind, luckily there were like 10 cars in the drive-thru, that gave me enough time to realize, like, I literally it wasn't even on my brain about like having a Starbucks coffee. Like, I was on my way to do something else, right? Like, and just, I saw the sign, and I pulled in, and I was sitting there, and I was like, oh, this drive-thru is going to be too long. And I'm like, I don't even want coffee. And I had realized that I was like, oh my God, because I saw the sign, like I like just drove in, like as if, oh, there's a Starbucks, I got to get a coffee on my way. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that, It's just this mindless, unconscious aspect that is just really intriguing me about how we are with food. That, yeah, you do have to eat. So like, how do you get out of like the things, the habitual
Well, it's
I
also
remember,
your own identity, you know.
what'd you
Just
say?
like it's also your identity. You know, a lot of times, even though we're trying or working on it, we still haven't gotten rid of the fat girl identity, or that whatever that identity, where whatever it is that you see yourself as. And so even though you might be totally thinking from a different level, until you really start asking yourself, why am I seeing myself today? What do I see myself as? Do I see myself as a healthy person that's help really in my mind? How do I see myself, and what do I see myself for the future? What is that picture in my head? If you're seeing yourself as a big fat person that's not healthy, then it's very hard to not step out of that loop. It's a lot of it's up here, and it's so hard to get to that point where you can stay in that pattern, or stay in that idea of breaking that pattern and getting into an identity that is really foreign to a lot of us in the beginning. How do you step into an identity that you've never been into before? And that really starts with a lot of introspection, and a lot of just working on your mindset, doing a lot of vision boards, making yourself thinking constantly of how you want to start seeing yourself, and don't let that voice or that person start changing you back, because it will, and you just have to step in and stop it, and it's difficult. My junk room back here, that's my OCD.
Yeah.
I've been getting to it for a whole year.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I was on the phone with my mom talking to her, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, because she heard this noise, a scraping noise, and I was like, "Well, I painted the living room, but there's some on the baseboard, so I'm like scraping it off, and I keep going along the rest of the baseboard, like to find the rest of, you know what I mean?" And it was like, she was like, "What, like, of the million other things that there are to do, like to do," and it's like kind of stuck in that I was like, I didn't even realize. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know how much time I've spent doing this, yeah, in the eating thing, but no, for sure, please, like, do post, like, if you have some info that kind of, helps us understand, like, the difference between the compulsion, with the, like, attaching to anxiety versus attaching to emotion and kind of reward. I think that would be really helpful, because sometimes it is hard to differentiate, and sometimes it's both. Like, right? Like, both could be happening at the same time, or, with situations like that, maybe you're responding in one situation one way, and then with food, in another way. Who else?
Mandy, if you read what Mandy's saying up there, I mean, that's just, you hear that so much. That's exactly, she's saying what's happening with her, as far as the self-sabotage and, the fat girl idea. She's seeing herself as that for so long, that how do you get out of that? And I mean, the first step is groups like this, and just starting to take it one day at a time, and really making those changes, that breaking that pattern. And I'll try to post some things with some tips on what you can do, try to breaking those patterns. Maybe that will. And I'm not an addiction specialist. I'm more of an more geared into the obsessive compulsive disorder from the anxiety, because I actually have kind of that myself. So I'm a little more geared into that, but that's not really where my background is either. But I do have a little bit of knowledge in it. So I don't want to become I'm definitely not an expert in that area. So, but I do have some information that I could probably help with.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to mention too about the repetition, that it's easy to get frustrated when it has taken doing something over and over and over and over in an attempt to make a change. Like, to have that not like, at what point will this not happen any longer? Like, at what point will someone compliment me and I'll be able to be like, thanks, and like feel gratitude and feel pride and, not be like, not reject it. Like, at what, like, I have to practice, repetition of accepting a compliment, like in gratitude and actual, like, I believe that you're telling me the truth, that you're not just saying this and you don't mean it, right? Like, I believe you. So it's like, that repetition, that it's like, that is not failure. It's just part of the normal process of having to be like, yeah, I did it again, like, doggone it, right? Like, let's give it another go tomorrow. I went for the 2 bars and the bag of chips, like, I did it again. Well, that's, like, okay, like, we'll notice it. And, like Morgan said, like, release the, judgment of it and the focus of it that kind of keeps it coming back. And, like, hopefully, maybe the next time will be the time that it sticks, you get off the hand. I mean, it's different for everybody. What else have you guys noticed, like, in your own behaviors or situations? Like, are there other things that cause you to kind of fall into, like, mindless behavior when it comes to eating? Is it more emotional? Is it more like, busyness, that anxiety that drives you to it? Yeah, the identity thing, that does take a while. And that the repetition of what you want to see has to occur, right? Like, you've been seeing yourself a certain way for many, many years, many times in the mirror, many outfits that feel too tight, many episodes of eating and eating and eating, and then, like, punishing yourself and being pissed that you did it, right? Like,
Scariness, Chris, there could be a scariness of becoming the thin person. When you really look down into it, what's going to happen if I do become the thin person and the, whatever is in my mind that I want to become? Because how do I act? How do I, what do I do? So there, in that sense, that can create that a little bit of self-sabotage to always then have that excuse. And then sometimes it boils down to, how bad do you really want it? Do you really want to have that body change? Sometimes we say we do, but that deep down in, we're just afraid. So we have to, look at those aspects too, of the fear. Fear has a big component into it. Fear of change,
because
everything.
It makes me want to bring that up in conversations for people when they're first getting started. Like, are you afraid? Like, let's just put it out on the table. Like, like, because it's real.
Well, most people are. I mean, and it's not just about that. Most everything has to do with, fear of getting out of our comfort zone, fear of talking, fear. It's all based in, fear, anxieties, and then comfort, whatever you want to call it, what you fall back onto to stay in that comfort zone.
Yeah, it's like, are you ready to be uncomfortable? Because that's what's going to happen, like, these next however many months or years, or whatever your journey is, and going through and getting to the health that you're trying to get to is, like, make no mistake, this is not, this is going to be a ride. I mean, there's going to be some curves and some ups and some downs and some restarts and some, like, I messed it up yesterday, and it's like, like, just having that be known up front, that it's like, are you ready to move into this ride? And, like, I'm going to take it with you. Like, I've been on it myself. I'm still on it, clearly. But like just to kind of know that and put that out there, that it's like, it's not going to be smooth sailing. Like it just isn't. Yeah. Okay. I just looked at the clock. Sorry. So it looks like there's just a couple minutes. Any last kind of final thoughts or anything anybody wants to say on this topic? And if, as always, if any of you guys have any resources, books, podcasts, anything that you come across that you're like, hey, this is kind of what we talked about, like, please put it in the group for everybody else. There are a lot of people that end up going back and listening, to recordings later that can't be a part of the call. So I think anything that you put in and say, hey, this is related to the call we had last night, will help, be a resource, for other people. So I thank you guys so much for jumping on tonight. Thank you for your participation and sincerity and openness. I appreciate you. And we will see you next Monday night. All right. Have a good night, guys, and good week.